for inviting me to speak. It's maybe a bit early. You just mentioned I've just moved to Israel and assumed the post of science counselor in September. So I cannot claim to have a really full picture. I'm actually learning every day about the science relationship and also about the political relationship between Israel and Germany and Israel and the EU. So maybe my impressions are a little bit fresh. Let me just start with an event which we recently had in Tel Aviv. It was a colloquium of the Humboldt Foundation, one of our big organizations, funding organizations for exchange of researchers. And they also, they in this case discussed the future of Israel-Germany relationships in science and especially in higher education. And of course, in the center of the discussion is always this very strong narrative that Professor Deichmann mentioned in her speech. So how Germany and Israel reapproached each other after World War II and after the Shoah. And she has added some very interesting details to this story, but mainly I think for the past decades this narrative has carried the relationship in science very much. And when I looked around in the colloquium, you could see the scientists that were kind of incorporating this narrative, and they are still in sometimes very high position, like president or former president of the Technion, for example. What I was asking myself after a while is what is the continuation of this narrative, and what will happen when this generation who accomplished this fantastic task of getting Israel and Germany closer again after this past that we had before 1945. What will carry the cooperation if this generation has retired? And so I think that is actually the one of the questions that I would like to touch a little bit in this discussion, because it's not only a German-Israeli question, of course, but it's also a question that is relevant for the EU-Israel relationship in science and technology. So that would be my first question. I don't claim to have an answer to that question. Of course, I also speak with younger Israeli scientists. What is your interest in going to Germany, to Europe, to do research there? You get answers which relate to what was mentioned in the discussion before, the excellent infrastructure that you have in Europe, and of course Israel is also participating in some of these structures in a very active way, like ESRI, for example. That's one thing. Then you hear research in Germany, but does this carry in the same way as we have experienced it in the past decade? So that would be my question. And the second is when you look at Israel from the inside, of course, you immediately gain a totally different perspective on the kind of political discussion and discourse that's going on within Germany and in Europe. So the perspective from the inside is always very different from what it is from the outside. And then, of course, you have the question that was mentioned in the speech of Professor Rüttgers, and also the speech of Professor Vogel, namely what can science and technology and higher education contribute to at least trying to help a little bit with the problems that Israel faces right now. And I think there's the answer certainly, and also this has been mentioned before, is certainly kind of a step-by-step approach. And the German Ministry of Education and Research, for example, or the German Embassy try to follow that approach by, for example, funding trilateral projects which bring, for example, in environmental research or water technologies, which bring researchers from Israel, from Germany, from Palestine, from Jordan together in common research projects. So this would appear to be, and of course that's not only true for the environmental area, but it can also be done in the humanities. And actually, I've heard Israeli researchers mention that Germany is and Europe is the place where they can meet with their counterparts from Jordan or from the West Bank in a way that doesn't lead to repercussions for these researchers, negative repercussions. So this is something that we should explore a little bit in more depth, and the same is true for the area of education. I would just mention, although this is not higher education, but we are just the German Embassy is just funding a project for young Arab Israeli students, 9th and 10th graders, to have an additional training in IT and computer engineering, so as to enable them to integrate into the Israeli high-tech system in a better way. And we still have to wait whether this program is successful. It's a very small program, but this I just mentioned this as an example for the step-by-step approach that was mentioned in the earlier speeches. So maybe this is just to give some suggestions for the discussion and how Europe and Germany can contribute to this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Jörgens. And I think